Hello there, welcome to this video. In this video, you're going to discover the top 10 commonly asked questions in interviews on Scrum Agile methodology. If you have an interview coming up shortly, then this is a video for you. Question number one. What are the events, ceremonies in Agile methodology? So this is one of the commonly asked questions in the interviews. So there are four key events and they are listed out here on the slide. They are sprint planning, daily scrum, sprint review, and sprint retrospective. We are to cover all of these events in detail in the upcoming slide, but just to give a key summary, sprint planning, the agenda of this particular event is to craft a sprint goal and also a plan to achieve it. Second event, daily scrum, is basically a daily review meeting on the progress of the sprint goal and also look out for a adjustment plan if required and also to remove any obstacles. The third event, which is a sprint review, is basically an event to showcase the work which has been completed by the sprint, which has been completed by the team in the sprint to the extended stakeholders like sponsors, end users, and sales team, etc. The last event, which is a sprint retrospective, ideally, this particular event is to review the product development sprint process and also to identify any areas for continuous improvement. We're going to cover much more details on all of these events in the upcoming slides. Number two. So this is again another commonly asked question is the composition of the Scrum team. So ideally the Scrum team comprises of three main roles which are listed in the slide. One is the product owner, two is the Scrum master, and third one is the development team. The development team includes the developers, the testers, or any other IT staff. So all these three roles comprises of a Scrum team. Question number three. So this question relates to the artifacts in Scrum. As you know, Scrum methodology is basically very light in documentation, but these are the three major are kind of used in the process. So first one is the product backlog. So this contains all the things which relates to be developed for the product, the epics, the user stories, the defects, any other ideas. So all of this goes into the product backlog. And then we have the sprint backlog. So as I was speaking in the question one about sprint planning, so the items which deliver most value to the customer based on urgency or based on other factors. So all these items are transferred from product backlog to the sprint backlog, which becomes the scope of that particular sprint and which is used throughout the sprint. The third artifact is basically the product increment, which is delivered in that sprint. It contains the software package, the release notes, and the user manuals on how to use the functionality which was delivered in that particular sprint. So that summarizes the three major artifacts used in the Scrum methodology. Question number four is, what is velocity? So ideally, it is the ability of the Scrum team to deliver valuable product increment. So it's basically calculated based on the story points of the backlog items which were delivered in that sprint, or we can term it as done in that particular sprint. So let's say for an example, 41 story points worth of product backlog items were delivered in or completed in sprint one. So then the velocity of that scrum team can be termed as 41. Let's continue the example. Let's say in sprint 2, the team completes 42. Then they're going to average out 41 and 42 and then use that as a variable in the sprint planning meeting. Basically, this kind of gives an idea of what the team can deliver in a particular sprint and it's used for planning. So that's the main use of velocity. Question number five, what is the use of a sprint burn down chart, or what is a sprint burn down chart. So again, this is one of the artifacts used in the process to kind of track how the progress is with respect to the sprint goal, and then kind of adapt to achieve the goal which was planned in the beginning of the sprint. So if we look at the example chart which is given here, it's a 2 week sprint. Let's say it's 14 days worth of days it's tracking. And then the yellow line kind of tracks the story point which needs to be completed on a daily basis to achieve the sprint goal. And then the red kind of signifies what is the actual. So it's basically giving a plan versus actual view. And then during the daily scrum meeting, this chart can be referred and the team can adapt or adjust in accordingly to complete this particular sprint goal. So again, it's a very useful metric for tracking progress. Question number 6. So I was telling we'll discuss more in detail of the events. So this is the first of the four events in Scrum process. So which is a sprint planning meeting. So a lot of interviews will ask what actually happens in those meetings. So what the basically the purpose of this meeting is just to craft a sprint goal and also a plan to achieve it. So the participants would include the Scrum team, the development team, Scrum Master and Product Owner, and then they will use the product backlog and then pick, okay, these are the product backlog items. Let's see what should we target for this release. So for example, if it's the team is building a ticket booking app for a movie theater chain, so maybe they would have delivered the basic functionality of login, registration, and booking the tickets, but they wouldn't have the functionality of seat selection by the customer. So that can be one of the major functionality which they can target in the sprint, and that can go, that can be the goal of, like, that can be the sprint goal. And then that goal can be broken down into the user stories and epics, which will populate the sprint backlog. And also the velocity is used as an input to kind of determine what the team can kind of complete in that sprint. So it's, as we discussed in the previous slide, if the team can complete 41 story points worth of items, then in the next sprint also they can use that as a guiding parameter, and then they can keep, okay, we can only do for 41, let's see what we can fit in those things. Yeah. And then using all these inputs, so the output will be the sprint goal. As I was just telling in the example, the seat selection feature can be a sprint goal, and then the sprint backlog, all the epics and the user stories related to that particular functionality can be included in the backlog. And then a sprint burn down chart, which we just looked in the previous slide, can be charted with the planned story point completion throughout the sprint process. Yep. And the question number 7 is the next item, which is the event, which is a daily scrum meeting. Explained, basically they would ask to explain what happens in the daily scrum meeting. So this is a daily scrum, or it's also termed as a stand-up meeting. So the purpose is just to review the team's progress on the sprint goal and adjust the plan to get there. The participants mainly would be the development team and the scrum master. Product owner is kind of optional. So it's good to include the product owner, but again, he or she is optional. So the inputs would be the sprint backlog. Okay, these were the items, the user stories, and the tasks which are outstanding for this particular sprint, and also the sprint burn down chart. How is the team progressing? So the progress would be inspected, and if there's any impediments, or I was telling about the blockages, it can be a technical issue or a environmental thing, or there are various factors which will be blocking progress. So those can be identified, and then usually a follow-up call or a follow-up meeting would be set up to work on resolving those impediments. Usually it's all driven by a scrum master. or question number 7. Question number 8 is basically uh, describe what happens in sprint review meeting. So this review meeting happens at the end of the sprint, and ideally the purpose is to just showcase the work which was completed in the sprint to the stakeholders. This meeting will have extended stakeholder list along with the Scrum team, which will include the sponsors, the customers, or the end users, and also the sales team. They would like to see how the product is shaping up, and they also can provide their feedback. So the input again would be the goal. So example, we spoke about like seat selection feature, and then how the feature which was developed. So the usually it will be done by the product owner. They'll the showcase or demo this particular functionality to this extended audience, and then get their feedback, like are they happy with it, or if there's any improvements or any enhancements which can be done, it would be noted down and it will be added to the product backlog. Yep. So that was mainly happens in this review meeting. Again, the product owner also provides a status report and also a forecast of what would be coming in the next sprints, if yeah, and also when there is a release planned. So all those things kind of gets discussed in this particular meeting. And we'll move on to question number 9. So this is the last major event in the Scrum methodology, which is sprint retrospective meeting. So here basically it's the participants or the Scrum team themselves, the development team, the Scrum Master, product owner. The main agenda is to identify how we can make the product development process better, simple. Yeah. So they look at all the impediment list. That's the main thing, so that they can be prepared in the next sprint, and also the review comments which were provided by the stakeholders in the review meeting. So those things can be kept in mind while working on the next sprint, and also the burn down, especially the progress and how what were like what things can be done better in order to hit the plan. So it's more of a looking back, reflecting back, and also looking forward. So those outputs would be the action items for improvements which can be implemented in the upcoming sprints so that there's a better process. Question for this particular video is, again, it's what is definition of done. This is one of a tricky question which is asked, and basically it's an exit criteria which is agreed with the product owner and the development team for marking a backlog item has been completed and it's ready to be shipped. So example, login feature, or one of the feature which we discussed, the seat selection feature. Yeah, it can be only termed as done if it is coded, tested, reviewed, and accepted by the product owner. So this is one of the terminology for an item to be termed as completed. So let's say if the one of the item is only coded and tested, you cannot term it as done. All these factors which have been pre-agreed should be completed in order for an item to be complete termed as done. So if you enjoy this video, go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Right now, we post a video every week on business analysis, techniques, tools, interview preparation, and tutorials. Okay, thank you then. We'll see you in the next video.